Okay, welcome back to the 15th class of Rav Noach Weinberg's 48 Ways to Wisdom Sefer. Today we're looking at MIshna, the oral law. So last time we talked about what's chapter called Mikra, which is the written law. So Torah has the written law, which is our books, the Humash, the 5 books of Moses. That would be the written Torah. And then the oral law, which was later written down, but oral law we refer to here as MIshna. The MIshna was a writing down of the oral law. And Torah really goes, you need the written law and the oral law makes up what we call the Torah. Now, in the written, you'll find what to do. In the oral, how to do it. You need to know, what the mitzvot are, but then you need an oral tradition that's passed down to explain how to do these mitzvot. How, we know we have to keep Shabbat, but what's keeping Shabbat? So we need all kinds of halachot, which come from our oral Torah, to explain to us how to live our lives as good Jews. So we need to commit ourselves to learning not just the Chumash, but also to learning the oral Torah, starting with the Mishnah and moving to the Talmud or Gemara. So one thing mentioned here is it's important to make checklists like the important qualities in a future job or a future spouse. And for anything that's important and consequential, you want to make sure you have a checklist that's defined and memorized for easy access. So the Mishnah is this checklist. It's a comprehensive guidebook for all areas of Jewish living. Okay? Knowing how to live a Jewish life requires intensive learning of the oral Torah, remembering it, and putting it into practice. So part of this chapter goes into memorizing as much as we can of the Mishnah, because we need to know, we can obviously refer to our Rabbanim and our Sfarim, but as much as we have memorized, we know how to more quickly go about living a good Jewish life, when there isn't maybe time to refer back to our Rav or to our books, okay? So we need to commit halacha and oral learning to memory. Now, let's see. So here's an example. Let's talk the mitzvah of tefillin. So in the Torah, we get the mitzvah that we should wear them, and let them be totafot between your eyes. But what are these totafot? What color are they? What size? What shape? What type of straps? How many compartments? Which parchments are inserted inside? How should they be worn? Who should wear them and when? All this is expanded upon in the oral Torah. So we see that they really go together. The oral Torah allows us to live out the written Torah. So through learning Torah, it's not just all about, we obviously have our amazing Sfarim, our books that we refer back to, but along with oral Torah is learning through, nowadays, listening to Rabbanim, listening to Torah classes online, to learning with a Chavruta, learning with a Rav, speaking Torah, speaking the words of Torah. Can be just as important as sometimes as just reading a book by yourself. In fact, it's more important, because that's the way we really learn and internalize, is learning with Chavruta, speaking it out, talking about it, discussing it, arguing about it, things like that. So just a history on the Mishnah. About approximately 2,000 years ago, the Romans captured Jerusalem, and it sent the Jewish inhabitants into exile. The leader of the Jewish people, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, saw that the teacher-student method of transmitting Torah was in danger of being disrupted. Maybe they were, couldn't learn so much in Chavrutas or give Shiurei Torah anymore, and it was very dire situation. So he wrote down the oral Torah, and it was called the Mishnah, and it was to save it from being forgotten and lost. So that's when it was actually written down. So now we can study it inside in the Mishnah as well. And it's really important to remember that it is not a written law, it is not an oral law, it's a hybrid of both. We need both written and oral to really get to the bottom of our, learning Torah effectively. Okay, and as we talked about, so here's goes into one section about the different levels of learning Torah, how we're never done learning Torah because we can go from the pshat, which is like the simple understanding, which Rashi would give a lot of commentary on the pshat level, helping us understand the basics of what the Chumash is saying. And the Drush, Remez, and Sod. Each one goes into a deeper level of learning of what the Torah wants from us. So there's many different levels that we learn from our commentaries. Usually the deepest level, the fourth, the Sod, we get from the Zohar Kadosh. So that's not easy to get to that level, but we try to always dig deeper every year, deeper into the Torah to see what it's really telling us to do and how to live our lives. So let's see. It says in Kiddushin, page 38, derives that the words of Torah should be so sharply honed in your mouth, that if someone asks you a question, you will not stammer in answering him, but will rather be able to answer him immediately. So we need to internalize Torah, have it memorized so we can be sharp with our responses, teaching our children, things like that. And of course, sometimes we shouldn't guess. We should, be, ask people for help if we need help from our rabbanim and from our Sfarim. My Rav used to say, it's safer to use a sefer. It's safer to look through a book than to just guess. But we should also, make psukim in our memory, psukim, halachot, as much Torah as we can right up here. So it's just ready to use at a moment's notice. Okay, so just a summary of this chapter here. Torah is a combination of the written and the oral together. Written being the Chumash, and the whole Tanakh, and the oral being written down in the Mishnah, Gemara. Oral explains how to do the mitzvot, and oral is where halacha comes from. Oral learning means speaking Torah, learning with a chavruta or a rav, and not just reading the books. And commit Torah to memory and speak Torah. The pasuk for Mordechai is Ma Ahavti Toratecha Kol Hayom Yisichati, which is that the words of Torah should always be coming from your mouth if your name is Mordechai. That's what we say after the Shemona Esrei. Every name has a special verse, and that just happens to be mine. So I'm connected to it. And we speak Torah, we should learn Torah, we should memorize Torah, we should refer back to the Torah for questions that we have in life, and know that some things we find in the Chumash, some things we find in the Mishnah, and we should always use our Rabbanim and Chavrutas to help us in getting truth, understanding Torah, and living happy Jewish lives. Thank you.